All right, just a reminder, if you have questions, we will be taking those from the audience. Please put them in the Q&A box, not the chat box, so that we can be sure to see them. All right, Martha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you to TPA and Wondery for holding this great forum, because I get asked this question all the time. I'm Martha Little. I was with Audible for 8 years. Now I've started my own company called LittleMedia. And this is really a self-serving panel because I've been asked to help people pitch to folks like these, and figuring out who to pitch to and what to pitch to them is part of the big question here. So they've been wonderful enough to come and speak to us. First guest in no particular order is Anna Stumpf, Creative Director for Development at iHeart. Colin Anderson, VP of Content, Podcasts at SiriusXM. Rachel Neel, VP of New Content at Lemonada. And Jonathan Hirsch, VP of Global Podcasting for Sony Music Entertainment. Thank you all for coming. I'm just going to kick it off with a few questions, and I'm certainly going to leave time for questions from the audience. So very eager to hear from you guys. First of all, I just want to do kind of a quick round of what your perception of the industry is today, the buying and selling and opportunities, and then we'll get into specific genres of what you're looking for. So why don't, Colin, why don't you start us off?
Great. State of the industry. I would say we're definitely back open for business after a tricky financial and pandemic-y time. I think 2024, it feels like our sales are getting back on track towards like growth and optimism, instead of like maybe we can squeak through on where we were last year or whatever. Large studios and consolidation means that those large studios, I think, are looking for scale, and that's a challenge in the industry. It's a challenge even for teams like mine, where they're much more able to sell the huge giant hits than they are smaller shows. The programmatic ad sales is an opportunity for everyone. These like pre-produced, dynamically inserted, fill all the gaps with ads. So I think that's exciting for shows at kind of every level of it. But the negative of that is brand safety, I think, has become a thing that now that we're advertising with Coca-Cola and not adamandeve.com in the same way that podcasting used to, the content of each show is now getting screened by AI and transcribed, and they're picking out words and going, oh, Coca-Cola doesn't want to be aligned with this political thing or this sexual thing or just curse words, which for a long time has been what podcasting has been about. So that's been a challenge and something that we're having to address. The scale thing, certainly everyone's like, oh no, you have to be Conan O'Brien to have a podcast these days. I would say anyone can still start a podcast, and that's our ecosystem is still really positive in that I can start my own podcast with 5 listeners today in the same way that I could a decade ago, and I'll probably get paid about the same as I would have done a decade ago for it, which is nothing, or what I can scramble up myself. So the creative opportunity, I think, is still there. And with that, I'll shut up.
Great. No, wonderful. Anna, do you have something to add?
No, I mean, that was an amazing summary. I guess I would maybe add to that there is this conversation about trying to look for things that are more sort of always on versus limited series. There's sort of been this like down turn a little bit in sort of looking for that kind of content, although we still do. But that's just an ongoing conversation about how to make limited series profitable. It's difficult to do, and sort of always looking for derivative potential when it comes to limited series. But yeah, that's been a sort of ever-present conversation, I would say, right now.
Okay, great. Rachel?
Yeah, as we talk about, ever-present conversations, I feel like podcasting turbulent as ever. When I think about big, always-on shows and their origin stories, it's always in the back room under the shadow of like night. Shouldn't have been the success that it is, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like in some ways we're still there. So yeah, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is going to have a breakout hit, but also you never know who the next person is going to be. And, Colin, as you said, there's always space for that. And it's exciting to see people kind of meet that challenge. And there is a lot of optimism, especially there's so many people that still want to make, and, you know, the listenership just keeps growing and growing. So in some ways it feels like status quo for the industry, you know, just like insists that we keep being flexible in these ways. Yeah.
Great. Jonathan, last word on that.
I mean, everybody here and such a delightful group of people assessing the industry from their respective perch. I would say for us, just speaking, you know, from our perspective, you know, a lot of the big media companies that, as Colin noted, are kind of struggling with superimposing scale on an industry that really started in a much more DIY place. That remains a challenge, a daily case by case, show by show kind of challenge. But I will say that I feel like all of the big companies seem to move in sort of the same way at the same time in Hollywood and in podcasting, in all forms of media. And we're becoming more focused, I think, over the last year. And so it's easy to sort of look at the precarity of the industry and let that define the way content is being shaped. And certainly that does play a role, the precariousness of the industry, the growth, the disruption, the consolidation, all of that. But I think from another perspective, we're also just very focused on what we know we can build on, and we don't take it for granted. And I think one of the downsides of focusing too narrowly on scale when you're a big company is you forget the wins and you don't build on that. And I totally agree with Rachel. Like, it's just astonishing how many shows just happen to be remarkable breakout successes. And it speaks to the tiny window into the large world that most listeners enter into a story through, right? They have some specific, unique interest that galvanizes them to stay, some engagement with the host that they can't let go of, whatever the case may be. And we just have to focus on those little things, I think. And so not being as preoccupied with scale and volume as an industry can also help us be more focused. And I think that's the part that I'm trying to stay, have top of mind.
I feel like I'm lying on a floor and you're looking at us, Jonathan, but it's okay.
Oh, yeah, we got a newborn in the house, so I had to run over into the car to take this. It's very LA of me, I have to admit. I
Sure.
Stop the car by the side of the road and have a chat.
No worries. That's a perfect segue into my next question. I want to start with nonfiction. I want to hear from all of you guys. Who of you is buying nonfiction? And if so, what kind of length, cost are you looking for? Jonathan. Yes, you. Oops, you're muted.
Here. Yeah. We are absolutely still acquiring narrative titles, limited run series. There's so much that I could say about that. But what I will say is that one of the things that we chose to focus on over the last almost 2 years now is our subscription channel, The Binge, which provides us sort of a 3-layered monetization structure, right? Like, there's the subscription end of it where we're building a product that we feel distills what people want from limited run while keeping the playing field of the storytelling itself pretty wide, while also, you know, affording us a pathway to traditional ad sales in the free space, while also giving us the opportunity to take bets on derivatives. And I think inside of that channel and product and and how it's gradually become more defined, I think that's how we look at narrative at this point. And so again, just really focused on building that channel and trying to establish what listeners want from it. So
Great.
Yeah, I don't want to.
Thank you.
We'll talk more about it, but yeah.
Yeah.
That would be the
Rachel.
summary.
Next to you. Rachel.
Hi. So Lemonada, we are absolutely taking narrative pitches. What we look for in a pitch is just the I mean, the DNA of Lemonada is really, we started last day, that being the first flagship show that really looked at the opioid crisis. Lemonada's, you know, motto, make life suck less. Really what we're focusing on is just trying to have impact reach people and help people. So when we look at the narrative space, our most recent show on Cared For looks at elder care and kind of the holes in that system of care in the States. And so anything that's really going to inform, inspire, uplift, really like, that's what we're in the mood. That's what we're looking for with narrative.
And I'm going to ask this to everybody, is 500,000 for a limited series way above what you'd averagely pay, you know, on average pay for a series? Are we looking more in like 250 range? And you don't have to answer that, but if you can give us some kind of general, because I get that question a lot.
I'm going to go with Jonathan's nod that is probably more than we'd pay. Like we, like a lot of people, are avoiding limited runs just because selling them is so hard, and building consistency with listeners and habits, and so always on is way better for us. And so that's our kind of nonfiction wouldn't be like narrative nonfiction, but it would be more the curiosity kind of programming of like Freakonomics, Hidden Brain, Star Talk, 99% Invisible, kind of discrete stories rather than week to week narratives. And I guess shows where you can spend your 45 minutes and learn something rather than following a whole narrative arc and feeding into that kind of slight gab fest. It's the thing that you can talk about at your cocktail party that weekend. It's that kind of programming. That's
Sirius's jam, is to do fewer limited and more always on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. How about you, Rachel? No, Anna, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so for us, like we're such a broad network, and we are definitely looking at we definitely look at limited pitches. We take them, and what I mean, I guess when you're saying nonfiction, so again, narrative nonfiction and the type of nonfiction that Colin's talking about, knowledge curiosity shows, we're interested in all of that still. I think that when it comes to our decisions on, I don't know what you're more interested in hearing about. Are you more interested in hearing about limiteds or?
We're going to go to fiction too, but I just want to hear sort of the approach to nonfiction and chat. I'd love to hear a little bit about chat shows as well.
Yeah. I think I think in a broad sense, I think that we have been burned enough by, you know, trying to make celebrity hosts happen who may or may not be suited to the material that they are trying to do an always on chat show about. And so we have really learned the lesson of matching the person to the topic much better and being more careful about that, not relying on somebody's social following to necessarily mean that there just seems to be very shaky correlation between social following and success in podcasting. And again, like Rachel was saying, the successes seem to be sort of, they come out of nowhere sometimes, you're just not sure why. And it seems to be also just hyper specificity, especially because the market is so saturated. The concept of the show being very, very specific, right for the host, yes, but also just very specific for in terms of what's already being done. And so that is the hardest thing, I think, to do for people, but it's the most important.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how important is host investment in the writing and the guest interrogation? Yeah,
it's hugely important. I think that that's something that gets so overlooked. I think that sort of generally people think of podcasting as really easy to do, and I think specifically celebrities tend to think like, oh, this is just something I'll do in my free time, and I'll, you know, and that's something I increasingly talk about in meetings. Is like, that's one of the first things that, no matter who the person is, doesn't matter how big or small they are, it's like, are you passionate about this? Do you have to do this idea? Like, if we don't buy this, are you going to do it anyway? You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. why are you the perfect person to talk about this? What makes you uniquely qualified to do this, even if you are a huge celebrity? And then, yes, are you going to participate in the research yourself, or are you going to always outsource that? It's totally understandable. People need to outsource a lot of that, and that they should, and they have to keep something ongoing. It's like a horrible train that you can't get off otherwise. But to have the passion enough for it that they're going to do the research anyway. I mean, we worked with hosts recently who are just like, I'm in this every day, all day anyway. This is my life, and I live and breathe this stuff. That's the kind of person that we really want to work with.
And I just want to add on to what you're saying here. Number one, I've learned to love the moment in the process with someone who's never made podcasts before, where they say, "Oh, this is hard."
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I love
used,
it. Yeah.
yeah, I used to really, that used to upset me, and now I just live for that moment. So, and also, yeah, host investment is key to the success of any show. It's really such a thing to look for. And also what you're saying about people needing to delegate work. We found such success in someone who has like an interlocutor, especially as you're talking about these celebrity hosts. If you have somebody who can like turn the head of your host, who perhaps they're bringing to the table, it is so key to the success of a show.
Say a little more about that. In what
really.
role are they performing?
Either just kind of doing the traditional host whispering thing, or just being able to move in between you and them quickly, like so that
Not
you
on
can get
air.
things done.
You're
Not on
not
air. No,
Yeah.
behind the scenes. So like just standing at production.
Yeah.
So someone who can like stand in as the host, make decisions as the host, move like with and for the host. It's just been so it's been so helpful, and something now that I look for in a project. It's like, okay, if you're who is your other half? Where is somebody who is not you that I can reach? And does that person have production in their background? Because if those two things are met, then that will sometimes sway opinion on whether it's a deal or no deal, because it just makes such a huge difference. And I feel like you were alluding to that.
Yes. And what areas is Lemonada looking for in terms of chat shows?
I mean, honestly, any and all. I mean, I just feel like a good idea is a good idea. And oftentimes you don't even know you were looking for something until it lands in your inbox. You know, I think there's we're always investigating the white space, you know, but sometimes I think like, would I have thought normal gossip was interesting on the page? I think that for me is always what I go back to. Like, would I have known that was, interesting? I don't know the answer to that. So I really don't want to limit what comes our way, because I think all ideas are good ideas.
Right.
But truly there is that kind of, I mean, Lemonada, I have spent so long in public media, and this is the most mission-driven for-profit company that, you know, I've seen or had the opportunity to work in. So I, you know, things that you may think about sending to a public media organization would make sense in our inbox as well.
Great. Colin, what about you? Is this resonating? Do you guys looking for everything or very specific?
We're looking at specific areas, really, although the stuff about screening hosts for commitment absolutely resonates, because the pandemic and podcasting hitting its kind of peak inflection coincided to just mean that every celebrity's agent was sending them off to make a podcast, and they'd turn up in these Zooms looking bewildered and like, what's this? And the screening out of like, you know, this is going to be hard work, like particularly for our always on things, like 52 weeks a year or whatever is a commitment. Even if you're just turning up for that 1 hour of recording, that's a commitment. And so I often ask about like, how do we make this the 1 hour a week that you're looking forward to every week as a, like, as a commitment check? Like, is this a friend that you're getting to spend time with that you wouldn't have spent time with otherwise? Is this like, when we were developing Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, we were thinking about going towards history because Conan's a history buff. And so maybe there was a show in just letting Conan really immerse himself in that. It's like, why is this going to be exciting for the host? And then in terms of, I guess, chatcasts that we're looking for, entertainment's been a really strong area for us that we grew out of on the Stitcher side, out of Earwolf, the comedy network. So we've got kind of scale on the comedy side that we're able to then use to launch other shows and do our feed drops and help promote. And so that's really meaningful in bringing on any new show, whether it's a famous person or an unknown. If you can get it in front of millions of listeners in the first few weeks, then that's meaningful. The curiosity, kind of knowledge area is exciting and a priority for us. And then inspiration, the kind of Mel Robbins has been one of our biggest hits in the last year. So working with shows like Mel, School of Greatness, we've got Oprah Winfrey content coming through Sirius, Rachel Hollis. Like that's the kind of area that we're trying to grow in. And then we don't have so much stuff in sports, but are excited to do a little bit more sports stuff. So open to sports pitches as well.
Great. Jonathan? I know you said more narrow. You're still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Still here. Yeah, I think in terms of, we're talking about entertainment chat format at the moment, right? Yeah.
What areas are you looking to acquire in?
We're absolutely still commissioning stuff in narrative all the time, so that's always the case. As far as entertainment goes, we have select areas that we're looking at. We really are not focused on sports. That is not a category that we're trying to participate in at the moment. Who knows down the road? Or news. It just feels like those are very require a degree of establishment within those institutions to break through, that we feel like we have a better chance of making a difference in the entertainment space by not focusing on those categories for now. And I would say just more broadly, we're looking at a lot of stuff. We do look at some formatted shows, some more conceptual shows, but very few. We're looking for, talent for shows. But we are similar to what Anna, Colin, I mean, everyone on this panel has said so far, a host who feels not only like this is an urgent conversation for them to have, something they need to do, but something that they're passionate about, that they can sort of, go down a rabbit hole on. So I think when it comes to entertainment, we are looking at hyper specific concepts with talent that people want to hear from. And it needs to be urgent and it needs to be surprising. There needs to be some part of it that feels to us like, oh, I didn't imagine that person would be talking about this, if that makes sense. I'm just trying to put myself in the listener's shoes. And I think in a saturated market, when, they have to make 6 decisions with their thumbs before they listen to any one piece of a thing, and there's thousands competing all around them on the app, how do we get to the fewest amount of decisions the fastest? And I think the element of surprise has to play a role in that.
Great.
I'd say we've had that work against us occasionally as well, though, where you get a host doing something that isn't what they're known for, and their fans really turn out for the episodes when they revert to what they're known for, and they're like begrudgingly subscribe the rest of the time, and then iOS 17 comes along and unsubscribes all those fans because they've not actually listened in weeks. So that's been a challenge and a thing to look out for, is I guess talking to hosts about, like, not just do you have large socials, but how are you connected to, how can you engage your fans to come to podcasting, and how do we like really serve those fans once they're there.
Great. Quick round on fiction, and then I want to hear from all of you on what do you look for in a pitch? How should people pitch to you? And then we'll get to questions, because I see they're starting to stack up. So which of you guys are inviting fiction pitches? I'll start with you, Colin, since you're on my screen.
I'm not really inviting fiction pitches.
Okay.
Again, like 2020, I was like, I think fiction's the next thing for podcasting, and then the industry shrank, and I think now, like, let's go for the things that we have a better way into. I think fiction at the moment better suits the kind of independent creators who just really want to make that thing on their own, and maybe it pops. But it's a difficult thing to like take a gamble on at the moment.
Rachel, how about you?
I mean, I've just said I want everything, but I guess I don't want fiction. We've stumbled onto it. And when you talk about, Jonathan, just putting yourself in the listener's shoes, I mean, personally, I haven't found a fiction podcast that has taken me. I mean, maybe I've found one or two. And yeah, that's absolutely reflected in what you see in terms of downloads. And it's incredibly laborious. It's very hard to make. You don't see a lot of return. It seems incredibly hard to get right. And I don't know that anyone's really cracked it yet. So once that sea change happens, which I'm eager for, because I would really love to listen to many, you know?
Right. Right.
It's big in the UK because of the BBC. There's an uninterrupted tradition of it, and so listeners are used to it and enjoy it and turn out for it. Whereas the US, it feels, is kind of reinventing the form, and it started with kind of old-timey radio, like parodies as podcasts, and there's been some great examples, but the audiences haven't been like brought up with it in the same way.
Right. Jonathan and Anna?
Yeah, we're not commissioning fiction titles at the moment for much of the reasons that have already been laid out. I just don't feel like the audience is there yet for a company like ours to kind of configure that within our slate.
And Anna?
I wouldn't say that we would say a hard no to anything, to any genre necessarily, but we do look at fiction as a high risk thing for all the reasons that have already been talked about. It's costly, time consuming, really hard to get right. I totally agree with all of that. And I agree with that I have rarely heard ones that work. I do love working on them, but yes, and it's very hard to make them make money, and it's true, the listeners aren't there. So all of that I agree with. I think that we wouldn't say a definite no to commissioning fiction. Like, we do look at those pitches, but it would not be the first thing that we would choose to. I think it's very high risk, and so we would do it if we were over the moon for a pitch, and we also would have to have an audio sample. We'd have to have like a pilot to buy something. We do enter into pilot arrangements sometimes with people. So like we would definitely like slow roll something like that to make sure that we are, that the quality's there. Because for me too, like, I mean, I've worked on fiction podcasts before, and it is even more important for the acting to be good in a podcast than it is in a visual thing. And if the acting isn't perfect and incredible, and if if the listener can't follow what's happening and it's being signposted in a way that isn't annoying, the devices in audio can be really annoying to tell people what's happening, and the exposition that you have to do to make it work. And that is just like, as a listener, turns people off so quickly. So like that all has to be done so perfectly. And it's hard, but yeah, I would say we're probably one of the only ones who would even entertain the idea.
And it's
Anna, you're
probably more
talking about
play.
What did I?
Yeah.
What did you say, Jonathan?
No, I was just saying, I was just chuckling to myself. I was like, Anna, you're talking about, somebody shot me in my left arm and I'm opening the door to go out of the house.
Yeah.
But Colin, to your point about it being an IP play, I mean, maybe folks on this panel have experienced it differently, but in the little sample size that I have of working across some of these kinds of shows, and I agree, they're lovely to make, and I really do enjoy the process of making them. The derivative piece of it also feels complex, to be able to have a script and a writer and talent attachments with a smaller audience, and to roll that up into a scripted proposal or project. I think part of the reason that scripted buyers in film and television look at podcasts as adaptable IP is the fact that they can demonstrate audience and interest. And if it's a niche audience, that also becomes harder to sort of say like that they've kind of concept tested an idea too, you know? So
really quick, what do you look for in a pitch, and where should people pitch? And I'll start with you, Jonathan, since you're on it, because we have about 14 questions stacked up here.
I will try to be brief as best as I can. I think when it comes to entertainment, we are always taking pitches from talent. You know, we sometimes buy into established shows, but you know, a lot of that focus is internal in terms of development when it comes to like entertainment and chat shows. And certainly we can share like an address that people can, they can send them to me, and we'll put them in the tracker, and we'll get back to you.
Yes.
And we try to get back to everybody. When it comes to narrative, I think we're really focused on true crime and true crime adjacent. I think for us, it needs to be elevated from just straightforward true crime, but we are looking for, you know, adaptable, bingeable, you know, true crime and scam stories, where the characters are complex and captivating, where the world that is being created by those characters is something people want to inhabit and has cultural complexity to it. Stories with remarkable twists and turns, bomb in the water moments in the middle of the series, stories where the plane is landed, where there's a satisfying ending, you know, and stories that haven't been done before that kind of fit within that universe of programming. So in short, I would say those are the key things that we're looking for.
Right, and so send them to you directly, and we'll provide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Anna, how about you?
Yeah, we are such a big network that we're looking for, we don't turn anything away. So much similar to what Rachel was saying, you know, you don't know every good idea that could possibly be out there until you see them. So we don't like to be too prescriptive about what we ask for. We do have a submissions email box. We check it very regularly. We do try to get back to every person that pitches to us, but as you can imagine, it's a massive number of people. As I'm sure everybody on this call gets a massive number of pitches. So yeah, we do our best with that. In terms of what we're looking for in pitches, we definitely like some red flags I could identify that come up again and again are like something that's clearly been pitched for screen to begin with and has not been actually revised competently to show that it's now being thought of as a podcast, to the point where like the language of the screen pitch is still in the pitch deck. And, you know, things like that to me actually signal sloppiness more than they signal necessarily the pitch is going to be a bad idea. It's like, we don't want to partner with people who are going to send us something with that level of thought put into it. You know what I mean? It's like, read through it again, make those changes, you know, make it, grammar and spelling mistakes always sort of irk me too, because it's like, be careful with what you're sending. And we get all kinds of levels of, you know, carefulness when it comes to that. So it really means a lot to get a pitch that's thoughtfully done, first of all. Then the other thing is audio samples. We very, very often send things back for audio samples or for a pilot. It doesn't have to be a fully produced pilot, but although that's great. And we love looking at fully produced shows, you know what I mean? And that's because you really know what you're buying if you know,
right,
you know.
Right.
But even as little as having just a voice, because a lot of these shows are character dependent, it really matters to hear how interesting somebody sounds in audio, how good they sound, how intelligible they sound, all that stuff. And then for like a, you know, chat show, entertainment kind of show, it's like, what's the tone of this going to be? What's the point of view of this going to be? So if you can demonstrate that a little bit, even in a short audio sample, that's just hugely helpful for us to understand how specific it's going to be, what the idea is. So yeah, those are just some.
Right. If you do us the favor of typing your address into the chat so folks can know where to go.
The submission. Yeah.
Yes, Rachel.
I mean, I agree with everything that everyone has said, of course. Also, just quickly, Colin, one of the only, what is it, fiction shows I've liked is The Dark is Rising, which is so nerdy, and the BBC show, I think is it a children's book? I don't know. I love it. So one thing that I really like about collecting pitches is that you get to see that everybody has the same good idea at the same time. And I think there's something really fun about that. So just governing, just know that that's happening. So I cannot stress enough the why you and the why now are so key. Like, how are you going to elevate the work? I think is ultimately it, because Jonathan, you talk about development internally. That's definitely something that Lemonada does. Like, we're full production house. So we're developing things internally. So what are you going to bring to this? I definitely look for that. I loved what you said, Anna, about just more is more. Like, if you have one shot to like have someone's eye, give them the most of everything. I've been so impressed with the lack of clarity that I've received in some like pitches from people who have made amazing things in the industry. I love a deck. I love attachments. I love materials. Lemonada, when we're looking at narrative, we also love true crime. We look at something we call it True Crime Upside Down, where the woman doesn't die. So, anything where like the woman is the hero, Lemonada is going to be really interested in it. So yeah, I think there's just a few things that I look for. And also, anything that, I think this is true of all art, but anything that just makes me realize that I'd overlooked something or think about something in a new way, where it's like, oh shit, I do that every Tuesday, but I had actually never thought about that I do that every Tuesday, any kind of those moments are always so beautiful.
Yeah. And any address you can provide listeners and viewers here, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll drop it in.
Thank you. Colin?
Yeah, I threw our address in. Again, I like that we put them in the tracker and we get back to you. That's a similar system. And the tracker is much better than sending things to me, because someone's actually focusing on the tracker and chasing us up on it on a week-to-week basis. I guess we like a one-pager with like a talent bio. It's really useful to have socials or ways that we can reach your audience. Like, beyond socials, I guess we've found like authors with a mailing list or people with like a Substack, like that slightly more engaged community thing is really useful. So that's a green flag. Any kind of production folks that you've got attached or experience in the medium is really useful. And then in those meetings, like hearing from people that they love podcasts is useful too. That if a host can like stream off the 5 podcasts that they're listening to like every week, that's a green light. What are the red flags? I'd say one of the things like commissioners and people like us, certainly at the BBC, you used to see a lot of people going responsible for such hits as, and like naming the things that had succeeded. And really we lose our jobs for like green lighting things that flop rather than missing things that are good. So it's like the risk, and it's how can you convince us that there aren't these like red flags? Someone said that commissioners should say failed to prevent such hits as, and the things that like got through in spite of it. So like the red flags for us are like short run shows, the guest list, when people send a guest list and it's the same list of guests that it's like Barack Obama, and it's like, really? Britney Spears, the same guest list that everyone sends and that they can't reach at all. Lack of commitment from hosts as well are the things.
I always liked a competitive analysis too, like to understand who your competition is and why you're better, and to really think about that carefully. Great. Well, I know we have thousands of questions here. I'm going to address the first one quickly because he came in before this actually started. Blake Field asks, where do you guys stand on content that blurs the line between fiction and nonfiction? It's hard to figure out how to pitch. And my I want one of you to take it because my sense is that because none of you is taking fiction, that we're probably in an even more difficult area, but correct me if I'm wrong. Does anyone want to volunteer to take that one?
I will.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a pitch I'm thinking of right now that kind of does that, skirts this line, and I guess it's sort of like historical look back with reenactments. So it's like a bit of a mix. And we are, you know, I find that to be an interesting way of doing things. I mean, it does, again, depend on really good actors to do that. Like, and we've actually had, you know, finding good actors is really difficult, and you do have to, like, I mean, I'm in favor of using SAG actors, and that presents its a whole another, you know, wrinkle in production, and so it's difficult and costly. But that is something, like, if the idea is compelling enough, and if we think I think that hitting multiple genres can be important too. I think this sort of was hit upon when Jonathan, what you were saying about true crime, like when we're looking at a genre that's like really saturated like that too, and not that fiction, nonfiction is saturated at all, but this sort of, it lends into this too, is this vibe of like, if we're looking at a true crime thing, we want it to also be funny. We want it also to be weird. You know what I mean? You want it to not just be this, like, you know, replica of what's been done a million times before. Right. And so I think if I were looking at a fiction, nonfiction concept, that involved like reenactments, I would be interested in it if it hits several elements in that same way, if that makes sense.
Yes, great. Okay, so Uzo Chijoki, I think that's how you say her name. When considering buying, licensing a product, how do you weigh a podcast audience versus its content or accolades? Example, a DIY award-nominated winning show that doesn't have a large audience due to low marketing budget. Who wants to take that one? Does that make sense? Considering buying, how do you weigh the podcast audience versus its content? So, you know, are accolades important versus expansive audience? How do you weigh those? Rachel, do you want to nail that one?
That was very NPR. I think that it's something to think about. I don't know that it would fully tip the scales, but of course it makes something more interesting. I think you take on different shows for different reasons. I think sometimes you know that it's going to extend your reach for because of downloads and because of just sheer impact of audience size. And then sometimes you just know it's going to be buzzy and in the space and people are going to be chattering about it, though it might not be the biggest thing that comes back at you. And sometimes you just know it's going to be smart as hell and you definitely want to make it and you feel impassioned to do it. It's going to make you look really good. So I think all of those things come into play when you're assessing a pitch, and it's really a case by case. I think that's something that you have to, everything would have to align to make that work, but it's absolutely not a no.
Mm-hmm. I see others nodding, so I'm going to move on. Anna Deshawn, I'm wondering if any of the that's jumping around, any of their companies are looking for shows that center on LGBTQ stories. Anyone want to take that one?
Yeah, we actually have Anna here. We have a slate dedicated to LGBTQ plus stories called Outspoken. And so we are always taking pitches for that particular slate. And it's not that an LGBTQ plus focused show cannot appear on our main slate either. It's just that we have that particular slate that's focused on shows in that genre. So the answer is yes, we're looking for pitches in that area all the time. Yeah. Definitely.
Anyone else chime in?
We are looking for diverse hosts across the content areas that we're focusing on. So less LGBTQ or BIPOC focused content, but more LGBTQ and BIPOC hosts and production companies and general partners.
Great. All right, Dusty Weiss, podcast delivers superior value to a more trackable audience than most other forms of advertising, TV, radio. And yet the CPM cost of podcast advertising still seriously lags those other media. When, if ever, is the CPM going to reflect the value delivered, and what's it going to take to get us there? Anyone want to?
Such a tough question, because I think when it comes to the the four of us, our focus is really um on the content of the shows and storytelling. I mean, could certainly speak to some of the business side of things and the monetization of podcasting, but and again, I'm no expert on this, but I think part of it has to do with how advertisers, what kind of information advertisers are able to glean from a podcast audience versus the kind of insights that they get elsewhere. That's part of it. And likewise, then how much of a return on investment that is. And then also, the kind of dynamic between dynamically inserted advertising, things that just appear at scale, localized and all over the world, in a podcast, versus like host read bespoke advertisement that comes at a premium, and trying to figure out what that rate is. So again, I'm like not an advertising expert, so I'm probably the wrong person to raise my hand and start talking about it, but here we are.
Yeah, well, we're in the
I do
content
think,
realm here, so yes.
yeah, I do think that it is, I sense the frustration of the question, and I'm sympathetic to it, and certainly
We
it
all
would
are.
be great if the CPMs were higher,
Yes,
for sure.
yes,
Yeah, we definitely all want that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mars Marcello asks, when it comes to monetization, we know smaller to mid-sized podcasts have highly engaged audiences. Do you have any insights onto how to make the ecosystem more equitable for creators? Anyone want to take that one? Everyone's like, oh, no idea.
I'll just volunteer things I don't
Yes.
have good answers for. Yeah, so I mean, I think maybe I'm not totally understanding. I think part of the challenges of the question is like if small or mid-sized shows have more engaged audiences and larger ones don't. Maybe I'm not understanding how that has to do with equitability.
Yeah, I don't
You
know.
know?
I think it's like finding the right sellers, because a small and mid-sized show, if it's
Yeah.
the biggest show that a seller is selling, they'll sell the heck out of it. They'll go, this is the brand that's a really good fit for this show. I'm gonna go direct to someone at this company and tell them what podcasting is and how podcast advertising works. And it's like all this extra work, but if that's someone's focus, then it can be done. And it's 10, 15 years ago, it was people going out and just finding a brand that's just a really good fit for whatever it is their podcast's about, and impressing the CEO of that weird little company and getting some
Right.
money out of them. Like
Right.
it can definitely be done. I think there's a risk of those shows, like I said earlier, getting lost in the mix of like a giant podcasting company, but in a more kind of independent world, there's people that can sell them. And yeah, I've seen that work several times over. You just have to find a good seller.
Adam Flaherty asked, do any of your networks make distribution deals with creators based on strong concept and great host, if you believe there's a market and audience for it, versus a creator self-funding and launching the podcast, growing organically, and then pitching to a network once there are impressive analytics? We've somewhat addressed that, but anyone want a quick comment there?
I mean, we do it both ways. Like we will take on an existing show, or we'll try to grow a show from scratch. We do both of those things.
Yeah.
I think I'm understanding the question.
Yes, you are. I think that's great. Laura Stassi asked, I'd love to hear about on-demand content in the nonfiction realm. Laura, I think you mean also always on content, that sort of weighted against serial versions. We did discuss a bit of that at the top, but is it heavily weighted in the always on? What's sort of the percentage of your companies? Colin, I don't know, you have a lot of always on. I think.
We're very always on. We've done a couple of limited runs where we've been able to get a presenting sponsor to come in. So it's like Sound Detectives, LeVar Burton's thing, which was scripted fiction, but we were able to get Half Price Books to come in and guarantee X amount of money, which made that viable where it might have been difficult otherwise. I kind of wonder if there's more to the question about all on demand as well, or people buying individual episodes, or like the Patreon side. Like there's definitely these other models that can support different kinds of production.
Jonathan, thoughts there?
No, I was just
Yeah.
trying to parse out the parts of the question myself.
Yeah. Everett Junkala, is it better for you to have a direct focus or various? My show focuses on the automotive world as a whole, which allows me to branch out into anything, but I wanted to know if it would be better to focus only on one of the industry, pieces of the industry, history, tech, toys, design.
I
How
think
about-
I mean,
was
yeah.
best. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go, Anna.
I just like, but based on, I was saying this earlier too, I feel like starting specific is better and then you branch out later. I mean, I think being narrow at first is good because you really define things for your audience. They know exactly what they're getting from you in a very, very specific way. And then if you've got traction and then you spread out, that's how I would approach that. But I'm curious what everybody else would say.
No, I think it's right. I think, when you think, you said this earlier, I really connected to it. Specificity is better. It's better across the board. Like, it makes a joke better. It's just a better thing. You're taking that, like Colin, you said, taking the thing, that one piece of information and taking it to the bar with you at the end of the day, right? Like, the more drilled down you can be in your content in general, in life, the better. So I think that just resonates with storytelling.
Yeah.
I'd like look at the market as well and see what else is out there, because I don't know automotive podcasting. If there's not a podcast that's just about cars, then by all means be the podcast that's about cars. But assuming that there's a few of them out there, how are you going to stand out amongst those? And that's where being more specific. If you're the one about manufacturing, then you can get everyone that's in manufacturing to listen to your podcast.
Yeah. I always say the devil's in the details, but heaven is also in the details, to Rachel's point. It's exactly the right thing. So, Tanya, Joshua Dudley, are seasonal narrative-based interview shows being considered? Yes, I think interview shows, seasonal narrative.
I mean,
we're
not Wiser Than Me with Julia Louis-Dreyfus. That's seasonal. We do 10 episodes a season. We have multiple seasons. It's not narrative, but it runs kind of the same way on the back end. So to that, I would say yes.
Yeah, I'd say yes to that too, but it just depends on, I think that the challenge with putting multiple seasons of a narrative show to string it together to make an always on-ish kind of thing, which is the dream kind of in a way, is just like, how do you make them cost effective enough that you can actually make that many seasons? Just because you're putting a lot of them together doesn't mean they're going to be cheaper to make each one of them. So like, it's just that, it's like, how do you make them efficiently enough to be able to put them together? And you can have seasonal breaks, like, always on is a little bit of a gray area. I feel like you can have breaks and you can still be more or less always on.
Right. Tanya Muhammad asks, is there a pathway for indie shows in this market? They're so driven by celebrity, but she's asking, especially when it comes to narrative nonfiction niche topics, what's the best way to pitch?
I guess maybe the niche part of it is hard for me to parse out there in terms of what specifically is meant by a narrative nonfiction niche project. I think many narrative nonfiction stories are about very specific stories. I think I get the spirit of the comment though, which is, can you create independent narrative driven programming that isn't in one of these big buckets like true crime or scam stories or candidly some of the stuff that we really focus on? And I think the answer is yes. It's just about thinking of it. You can make the decision about what kind of audience you want to reach, right? Like, do you want to reach an audience that is the most engaged and the most a part of the community that the story addresses? And certainly that will be the audience that engages with that story. But if there is a way, if you're thinking about the entire listener base of narrative shows, that if you can frame your story in a way that invites everybody to be part of that, then certainly there's a space for that, I think, both in smaller scale and in larger sort of media environments. No
Great.
story's a bad story if it's a good story.
Right. We only have 2 minutes left. I'm just going to take a quick moment to say, as a longtime commissioner myself, I'm helping others to write pitches and formulate stories for you guys. So you can reach me at littlemediaco.com. And I'm also providing production services and an offer to this audience only of $300 for your first chat show episode top to bottom with promos. So you can find me there on there. But let's see, one or two more. Audiobooks, is anyone doing those? Anybody? Nope.
I'm
Okay.
going with Anna's head bob.
Well, I mean, we've done a little bit of that. So I think we're not first and foremost equipped to do audiobooks, but it's something that we have done in the past a little bit of. So yeah,
A little bit, yeah. Not spot.
We're not doing audiobooks, but I will say I really like the places where chapterized audiobook type stories are blurring into a podcasty format, and the sort of liminal space between those two environments is an interesting one. And if I were a betting man, that's going to be a space where we see more growth and more engagement. I think what's exciting about that is like there's a long history, at least among US listeners, of being habituated to paying for that at a premium. And I think that's really cool, because to make something really complex and premium, it costs a lot of money. So I think that part of it is interesting to me.
Yeah, great. I love that area too. I think it's interesting.
Also moving in the other direction, that Pushkin were developing podcasts into audiobooks so that you could reversion the podcast and maybe get some extra value out of that.
Great.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to jump to Rachel Strauss's question. Where do you stand on content catered for the Latino audience? Do you see the segment as a prosperous space, or is it a total market approach to reaching this audience? Anyone there?
Sorry, can you repeat the beginning of the question? I didn't hear the first part.
Where do you stand on content catered for the Latino audience? Do you see the segment as a prosperous space, or do you by the total market?
We absolutely do. This is another area where we have a slate dedicated to the Latino audience called My Cultura, and it's growing all the time. It started a couple of years ago. So we absolutely see it as a growing and profitable space.
Great. Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you all for your time. You've got a very, very busy chat happening. So if you get a chance to look at that, I'm sorry we didn't get to